This is the July 15, 2014 edition of the Board of Selectmen's meeting. This is the pre-All-Star Game warm-up edition of the Board of Selectmen tonight. We're going to have an executive session at the end of the meeting to discuss pending litigation, Redgate Farm, Clark Tavern. A lot of litigation, I guess. We tell you every time that the meeting is being recorded, so be careful, I guess. And we'll start, as we usually do, with a moment to indicate our appreciation for our servicemen and women serving in Afghanistan. Thank you. We have coming in tonight a group of different town committees, all sort of focused on the downtown. There's the Downtown Study Committee, the Cultural District, the Cultural Council, the Historic Commission, the Historic District Commission, the Dwight-Derby House, the Pocket Park, the Aesthetics Committee, the Planning Board, and the Sign Advisory Committee. Holy smokes. We got a lot of boards. Mike, what are we going to do?
I think we wanted to get together and first find out what each of the boards has been concentrating on, and then see if there's any common goals that we should be looking at, our projects we should be undertaking. So.
Do we want to run through them in order then? Maybe the Downtown Study Committee?
I am Matt McCormick on the Downtown Study Group. We don't really have a formal report as such. We are sort of in, I guess you'd say, restructuring or hiatus with our group. We had talked about, the last time I was here, we had talked about what the Downtown Study Committee does relative to other groups that have interest in downtown. We talked about at that point if we were leaning toward a design review group or if that is worthy of conversation. So right now we don't really have a particular agenda or a schedule that we've been following with a couple of resignations and things. So we're kind of, Christine is sort of ad hoc head of it at this point. So we'll be presumably getting a little more organized or revisit what we're actually chartered to do. One of the things that we had discussed was maybe dusting off the plan from, I think it was 2006, the downtown, when we had the outside, I don't know how you'd characterize them, consultants, I guess. This is prior to me, so I'm kind of just going off the top of my head. And maybe looking at that again and seeing what applies or what doesn't apply. It would be sort of new material. I think it's a new material for a lot of people because it's 8 years old. I know that Sarah's taken a look at it, so maybe that will probably be a new sort of jumping off point for our group. But that's pretty much where we're at.
It had some very good ideas, I thought, in terms of making that block that's, or where the pond is and the Unitarian Church, sort of the center of the downtown, and having the parking lot in the middle of the block and have the businesses open up to the parking lot. Mike tells me that the businesses aren't interested in doing that, however, unfortunately.
There's been some difficulty into how the businesses are organized. There's a trust that I believe involves 3 of the buildings. And then there's another building where the owner is, I believe, doesn't live in town. So it has been difficult. Probably they would need some guidance from some sort of a town board or consultant to try to get them working together as a group, almost like a charrette type thing. Yeah,
maybe the Downtown Study Committee could act as the sort of the catalyst to get them to work together.
I think, I mean, there's a lot of, I know, Richard, you were in a few of the meetings when we talked about the utilities downtown, feasibility of burying utilities, and so I guess the scopes of the project are large and small, but it's, I can't say that there's been a lot of current activity, so it's kind of like revisiting it, I guess. I don't know, I'm probably inclined to use that report, like I said, to sort of restart it or a new jumping off point, unless there's more direction or specific areas that you think that we should focus on.
I think, Mr. Chairman, and that's the report he's talking about, the Medfield Downtown Vision and Action Plan. I think it would be a great jumping-off point to begin to look at a master plan and use this. I mean, they did a tremendous amount of work on this. To use this as at least a guide and see what has changed since 2006. For example, one of the things was to improve the area around Mobile. Okay,
Sure.
so that's been done with that. But the overall goal was to develop a vision and strategy, for the downtown area. You talked about the overhead utilities
Right.
in the downtown area. It talks about beautification, improved streetscape. It talks about specifically the areas around Park Street, Baxter Park, Zoll Art Gallery expansion, the Montrose School, Library, Gazebo area, the area in front of Larkins, Janes Avenue, First Parish Church. It talks about the downtown becoming a more walkable in various connected areas, such as with sidewalks. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in here. Again, the overhead utilities. It talks about working with groups such as MEMO and the Montrose School and the private businesses that are in the downtown. It talks a lot about restoring the trees. They have a lot of photographs that show, the tree-lined streets of Main Street, North Street, and beginning to come up with a master plan to, restore the trees back into the downtown area. It talks about future architecture and stores coming in, how we can guide them in things such as color and other things that are there. It talks about the signage. I think we've done a pretty good job with a lot of the signage, but
Well,
again,
part of it was with the Pocket Park group and the Downtown Aesthetics group, Downtown Committee, like where do these groups overlap? And are they redundant, or should it be one group with subcommittees? Or so I was thinking that maybe that might be an area we could dip our toes into tonight to see.
I'd love to see like a summit where you get all these groups so that we're not overstepping each other, and we can come up
Yeah.
with one master plan of what is the best committee. We have so many committees that do so much in the downtown. How can we, in my own opinion, how can we better coordinate that? Open space, recreation, greater use of the pond, Vine Brook. I'd love to see like a summit, be able to use this and see, a lot of work was put into this. Is this something you want to continue with? And try to get all the different groups so that we're on the same page. For example, even Medfield TV is looking, that they want to put some memorials of some individuals that just put a tremendous amount of time of Medfield TV, and they want to use the area down by the end of Meeting House Pond, Baker's Pond.
Right.
But that property is under the control of Park and Recreation Commission. And then you have Girl Scouts and Eagle Scout candidates wanting to do some work there. You have the Garden Club. You have Dwight-Derby that's across the street.
Historic,
Rather than all these different, groups making different directions, I'd love to, if we get some kind of a summit, get them together, and then work out amongst them what's the best way, to coordinate downtown.
I was thinking of something like that so it would be structured like with subcommittees of the same group rather than different groups operating independently and not knowing what the others are up to or duplicating effort. Because there's really, you'll see, I'm here on behalf of three of the other groups, so there's really a finite amount of manpower that you're going to get to concentrate on downtown. One of the things I had mentioned to Sarah earlier was one of the things that I was thinking of is that the state hospital is sort of in the spotlight as the new girl in class who's getting all the attention, and I don't want the downtown to sort of get kicked to the curb in the interim, so it's a town will have to do a balancing act to make sure that all areas get enough attention, I think. But, that's nothing new, I suppose.
So for right away, you need additional members, is what I hear you saying as well, correct?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking, I guess it sort of depends if it's restructured. If you, let's say, for example, the park committee, if that's folded into a downtown group, then, well, that gives us access to another 4 members. But like Jean Menio is head of the park committee, well, she's also the cultural chair, and then, you know, we do some work with signs and, you know, involved in this, so there's a lot of, I think you know what I'm driving at, overlap or whatever. I don't know if it's a restructuring or how you'd want it to be characterized, or, but yeah, new members are always, it seems we're always in that slot, looking for new blood.
I think it sort of cries out for at least getting together. I would maybe think of it as a charrette rather than a summit, like that was done, a visioning for the state hospital, and that could be one of the target or task number 1 is to figure out how to restructure the various different groups that are looking into the downtown, and then come up with a list of things. I mean, I think that, off the top of my head, I can come up with, you know, the sign for Park Street. We need a sidewalk on Park Street too. Better signage, if we had sort of uniform signage in the
Well,
downtown.
you have streetscape as an issue, the sidewalks, trees, lighting, you know, all that stuff. You know, and then we've done a lot of work on the Straw Hat Park, the Pocket Park, but sort of looming on the horizon is Meeting House. That what's in that end of Frary Street, you know, that's has nowhere to go but up. So I mean, that's sort of the next thing. I think that's probably detailed in that old.
It is.
And then that's already 8 years old, so it's, you know, time flies, I guess. Just different ideas.
And I'd like to say, way too, that MEMO does a tremendous job, and they meet, but not everyone in the downtown area is a member of MEMO. So somehow we have to tie those people in as well, because otherwise they're just going to make decisions on their own. And if they had some guidance, that here's kind of the master plan the town has, here's different things we'd like to have, then I think those other businesses, knowing that, and perhaps they don't even know what some of the vision is that, that we have.
That might be where design review comes in also,
If there were new
providing-
businesses.
providing guidelines to say, you know, we talked about, you know, certain types of trees that'll lend itself to urban environment or whatever. So you'd say, well, you know, when a tree goes to get replaced, you'd work off a specific list so that you're within something that makes sense. Up until now, it's really just been kind of like
Ad hoc.
whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I was interested that we ended up with 4 ginkgo trees. I wouldn't have guessed, but
Yeah, that was.
maybe
We
that's
were
the new
fortunate that
downtown in
Mike,
Medfield.
Mike Leader's on that group, and but he presented a few different options, and I mean, there's a lot of talent in town to answer these kind of questions, you know. So that's the good
Yeah.
thing. But it's tough. It's tough to get the commitment, but so it goes.
Although it seems like a lot of things are happening in downtown now. You know, it's like the downtown 3 or 4 years ago was kind of a little bit worn at the edges and a little bit frayed, but all of a sudden it seems to have.
Well, especially
sparked
now
another
next door here with Ord, between Ord
Well, you
and
got that,
Lord's and
you've got
Starbucks.
the Starbucks and
It's
that,
kind of a
and
new
you've got
downtown.
The bookstore.
It's funny to think of the library will be the old building.
Yeah, library and town hall, yeah. So.
Oh.
But, you know, the other thing I've noticed when you walk around nights, how many places now have outdoor seating? And it really brings a lot of life to the downtown at night. A lot of people walking around, and really, it's not quite Deadfield anymore.
Well, that's the, I know Sarah was working on a parking analysis.
And, yeah, in fact, the report from the consultant is in there tonight, so.
And isn't there another grant she's looking at to make it more pedestrian-friendly in the downtown, too?
Yes, she's looking into that, and the chief has some work, they was working with the MAPC on looking at the intersections to see if they can do something with, in terms of traffic flow, so.
And I think also the chief had some ideas, and I think with the sidewalk and aesthetics committee, just what to do with some of the crosswalks and stuff. He had a number of ideas, so.
Yeah.
Mike, do we have is the downtown vision and action plan that Richard was holding up, is that on the website?
I don't believe so. That was done about 8 years ago before we had a website, but
Yeah, that should get
certainly
up,
put
that
it
should be on the
out, yeah.
website. This parking study that is in our materials tonight should be on the website too, hopefully. I think people would like to see those.
we have quite a few groups. Maybe we ought to try to get through them all first, so.
Yep, thank you, Matt.
The Medfield Cultural District appreciates this brief opportunity to acquaint you with two particular aspects of our organization while addressing how those impact downtown redevelopment. First, we are comprised of 7 members: Kristen DeBotti, Jean Minio, Deborah Kelsey, Diane Borelli, Sarah Raposa, Bill Pope, and myself. We will very much miss Deborah's energetic participation, and we wish her just the best as she takes her skill set to Gloucester. In her stead, Alex Lunt, sitting beside her, our senior librarian, will give his leadership. We meet monthly at the library to tackle a wide range of opportunities which are focused on increasing local and visitor spending. At the moment, we are exploring how best to maximize the experience anyone has when visiting cultural sites in Medfield, some of those being attached to history, commerce, recreation, and the arts. Another agenda item is to decide how best to promote a community-wide calendar. Amid all our challenging tasks, we are moving ahead to acquire designation as a nonprofit charitable organization and to consider how a part-time leadership position can better leverage both public and private perceptions of delivering cultural activities. To embody our focus as to how Medfield assets are differentiated from those in any other community, we have changed our name to the Cultural Alliance of Medfield, inasmuch as we will designate over time a number of cultural districts within the town. We felt that a name change would clarify our organization and allow for additional districts to be included. Thus, Medfield will have a variety of cultural districts identified by name and geography. A good metaphor for the alliance is an umbrella, which gathers underneath it a variety of persons and organizations needing collective coverage. Item number 2. The Cultural Alliance is learning valuable lessons in our process to differentiate Medfield's cultural amenities from those in every other town. We constantly ask ourselves this question: why do these set us apart from other communities? We are always narrowing our focus. In doing so, we are learning to jettison the generic. What is it that Medfield wants to be known for? What do we need to do to own it? It might be, if one might say, a brand could be preserve the past, engage the future. Then we ask, how is this different from every other community who wants to do the same? The answer is, it really isn't. Our strategy is to move beyond the first level of creativity. Both visitors and locals perceive Medfield for what it is, good or bad. What is it that sets us apart from every other community? The Cultural Alliance of Medfield responds positively to the need to rejuvenate downtown Medfield. In fact, all that lies within its borders. To that end, Medfield needs to be much more specific in finding its niche. Why do visitors come to town? How soon will they return? What will they tell their friends about their experiences here? The Cultural Alliance champions community branding as a process which involves the entire population of this town. A brand is the preservation of an essence. We cannot build successful branding using focus groups because a group hug mentality will only give us a watered-down generic brand, a one-size-fits-all, which is not a brand at all. Small towns across America are succeeding today in setting themselves apart. Travelers Rest, South Carolina, a town one-third the size of Medfield, has repositioned itself from being a gateway community to now being a destination. Opelousas, Louisiana, twice the size of Medfield, now brands itself as perfectly seasoned, with a flavored history, music with a spice, and a zest for life with its flavored food. Springfield, Vermont, identical in size to Medfield, overcame its predicament as a pass-through town for commuters. Doesn't this sound familiar? With a brand which resonates its reinvention. Part of your agenda tonight is to hear from 10 different organizations as to Medfield's downtown redevelopment. Each of these can admirably tell you what they are doing, and some can tell you how they are doing it. What is missing to our collective response is why we are doing what we are doing. Economic development requires community-wide participation in establishing how we want people to think of us. The answers to what we do and how we do it are easy to identify. You will hear them tonight. Instead of looking at Medfield from the outside in, what, how, why, our suggestion is to reverse this process. Look from the inside out. That begins by asking the question, why? Why are we different from any other town? Why do people come here? In today's economy, the answer starts with the experiences of locals and visitors when they are here. Only then we will know why and if Medfield is inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to share the Vermont towns, what they came up with, their brand?
Springfield has a long and spectacular history in invention and the development of the machine tool industry.
Oh,
The organization that they worked with to go through the branding process came up with the brand Springfield Reinvented. And everything they do in town plays off being reinvented. Arts reinvented, history reinvented, dining reinvented. They have a river that runs through it so that they can maximize something. A little difficult for us to reroute the Charles River, but yeah. So they went through this process about 4 years ago. It has been a success, and there's a lot of similarities between that town and our town, primarily in terms of commuter traffic. And that was what was facing them. So that's Springfield.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Jean Minio can't be here tonight, and she will be taking the next year off as the enforced 6-year sabbatical that the Mass Cultural Council dictates. So I'll be serving as the chair next year.
you.
And so right now, on behalf of the Cultural Council, I'd like to thank Jean Minio for really raising the bar on our whole organization, both in professionalism and organization, and really being a great part of the Cultural Council. I'd also like to thank the citizens of Medfield, the selectmen, and all the supporters of the Cultural Council that voted to match our state grant, doubling our budget. It's a far cry from the years of the Jane Swift administration, I think, where we were cut in half and we had 2 grand to dole out, and it was really easier to just write 1 grant. But so we're looking forward to a great year, and of course we're not helping the downtown in its infrastructure. We're just helping in activities. So anything we can do, we're looking forward to having double the activities in both visual arts and music and theater and whatever we can do in the next year.
Excellent.
So we're looking forward to that. We're going to have a great year, and plan to probably have another grants reception in the spring, because that really helped to publicize us and let people know who we are.
That was a great
So,
idea.
in
Fun
keeping
event,
with
too.
that, yeah, in keeping with that, we're going to have 2 deadlines for grants. The original state deadline is October 15th, and that's the one we really publicize. And we'll give away most of our funds at that deadline, voted in November. And again, we're going to have an additional deadline for the remaining municipal money that will be March 15th. So as other things come up during the year, we'll be able to fund them for next spring and summer. And so looking forward to a great year. Thanks.
I think Ron is
Ron.
also modest because he's been involved in this for many, many years, and he's done a lot of work with this over the years, so we got to thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Ron.
I'm Anselin Wolf, and we don't have a formal report to give, but we certainly are concerned with the health and growth and vitality of the downtown. Our charge, as you may know, is historic preservation throughout the town. Most recently, we've been focusing on working with the demolition delay ordinance, trying to keep buildings up so they have a second chance at life, and for developers to explore what might be done rather than simply saying, a piece of land. And we are seeing significant interest in land that runs up North Street. You probably have all been watching. We have several delays in place. One house looks to be rescued, which is great. One house is up in limbo, and one is likely to be coming down. We do not win them all, but we work hard to at least get them a stay of execution and additional consideration. In terms of the downtown, one of the things that we have looked at and not moved forward on yet is some signage that would indicate the historic resources that exist in downtown, to focus, to label them in some way, perhaps one sign with a small map, possibly located near the library, so visitors and residents as well would know what they're looking at, when it might have been important, give them a little, possibly a walking tour that could be developed with it. We have not done much with that. We're kind of waiting to see what else is going on and to see how we can coordinate. So that's a very off-the-cuff report. I came to listen, not to report.
Anselin, would you be willing to share the 3 houses that you referenced about the demolition delay?
Well, one is 70 North Street, the red
one?
The red house. We have imposed a demolition delay on that.
Next to the Rockland Trust and my
Right.
office.
Right, and we will be reviewing at our next hearing the demolition application for the garage and the swimming pool that is in the backyard. Probably, I guess both of those are not a great issue, but we have to go through the formality. But
At
the
that
house
same
itself
address.
is terrific.
The house, the garage and the swimming pool in the backyard of the red house?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and then there are the 2 houses that sit cheek by jowl farther up North Street on the same side of the street. I think one is 96 and one is, I think, 9092. 9092 is currently being worked on, will be rescued and as well built around with a residential development. The one next to it, the little blue one with the sort of gingerbread fringe around the eave lines and various appendages to the rear, is going to be knocked down. We're not sure the timing on that. It's an interesting building, but we felt that we couldn't really justify saying it's historically significant, but it should never be removed. I was the lone voice saying, save it, but then I like to save most things.
Is that the one that is connected to the house next door, where they're redoing the paint? John?
Well, it's same ownership.
One project?
It's the same ownership and same project. So that will come down, and I think that may be where one of the access roads goes in. I'm not entirely sure of their new plan.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 that we've been watching. as well as the wonderful house that's owned by the school, by Montrose, with, on the other
Cushman
side
House.
of the street, the Cushman House.
Yeah.
So we keep a watchful eye. We try to elicit the concern of residents and developers, because once something's gone, you do not get it back. So if there's a way to work with the existing buildings, that's what we're in support of.
I agree fully with that. That's why I hope, can you maybe just explain a little bit, if people are not 100% clear of what the 18-month demolition delay means?
Sure.
We know that you cannot tear it down within 18 months, but are there avenues in those 18 months to try to work, especially on 70 North Street? I know you guys had awarded the developer, Mr. Borelli, a previous award on the South Street. Is there a way that in those 18-month time period that work can be going on with the Historical Commission and the developer to try to save or incorporate so that we don't lose it altogether?
Well, that's certainly the hope, and that's the intention, but it very much depends on the developer seeing that it is in his or her interest to come back with a plan that says, I think I can save part of it, or I think I can offer it to be moved, or I think I can rethink my plan entirely. But beyond that, it really rests on what the developer is willing to come up with. We can say, well, we don't really think that the excuse of termites that once were here but aren't any longer is a good reason to say this is not an economically viable project or property. But it is a matter of opinion. We do try to work with the developers as they're willing to come back to us and say, here's iteration B, let's take a look at this, and we do. If we are convinced by the proposal that there is no recourse, then we can lift the delay and the project can go forward. But we do take a fair amount of convincing. Our client, if you will, is the history of the town and the physical embodiment of it.
Especially in that one, I hope, because what I feel bad is I know there was a family that had gone through that and was willing to restore and actually move into that. And I think as Rob Gregg had mentioned, and one of the things, what do we have in Medfield that is special and unique? And in my own mind, some of that is the history. You know, be it Clock Tavern or be it 70 North Street.
Right.
You know, that's what's special, I think, and that's. You guys, I think, do a great job of trying to be the, the voice. And sometimes, it's kind of like you're the lone voice on that. And it's very difficult, I know, because once the developers get it, they can just wait you out and then, it's gone. That's one of the reasons I think that people in this town expanded the demolition delay from the 12 months to the 18 months to try to give you a little more emphasis with that.
I think it underscores for a developer that we're serious and that they really should think about, is there another way I can approach this?
So you took the words out of my mouth with regard to, I was going to go back to what Rob was talking about in terms of branding. To me, Medfield's brand is its history and its unique name, being the only Medfield in the world. And I like the idea of focusing on the history, and because of Mr. DeSorga, we have all this huge editorial comment about the different properties in town. And I've been saying for a number of years that what we need is like a bunch of QR codes on these buildings where you can walk around and point your smartphone and hear Richard giving you the history of these different buildings. I think that we could become a destination for people that are interested in history, given I think we're getting enough of a critical mass of old buildings.
We've got to
especially-
keep them.
Yes, yeah, that's one thing. And then the other thing is that, I know that Mike doesn't like to hear me say this, but I understood that when the Lowell Mason House was moved, that the town didn't get charged for some of the things. The guy from Verizon, I happen to know a guy from Verizon who told me that we didn't get charged for the exceedingly high cost of moving because we were a town. And so to me, I started thinking, well, gee, that gives us an opportunity maybe to move properties so maybe the house at 70 North Street, if things couldn't work out, we could move it to the parking lot at the post office or something. I don't know, but it creates perhaps an opportunity.
In about 30 years, that land will be ours again, so you could do it, but you gotta wait 30 years.
Well, we do have a park next to a pond that's not too far away, too, so. And the other thing is that Mike had told us, by the way, on the Cushman House, that the Montrose School people had that on their list to work on after they finished their current building, and they were actually thinking of doing what you had suggested to them when we all took the tour of it, which was to make it into an administration building.
That would be a great and classy solution.
Yep,
Classy for them and classy for us.
yep, yep. Thank you, Anselin.
You're welcome.
Historic District Commission.
I believe they're actually meeting right now.
There we go. There you go. We'll ignore them then.
I would like to thank the Selectmen and the Downtown Study Committee for inviting me to talk about the Dwight-Derby House. I think it's a very important structure here in the center, in the heart of Medfield. And it's actually in an area that is very historic, with park, with the mill pond, with the Unitarian Church. So really, when you walk down that street, when you walk down Frary Street, you're actually walking down into the 1700s. As the front of the Dwight-Derby House is 1760, you know, the Unitarian Church has been there, and the pond. So that whole area is so significantly historic. And I wouldn't want to see too much change with that, just for that aspect that we actually have that to experience. With that, I'm sure you want to know how the house is doing. We do well as far as with our annual appeals. It sustains the house, though we could do better. We have found since the economy went down that it's much harder for historic buildings in general to get the funds they need to go forth with projects. So what we did is we put our thinking caps on, and we came up with the store idea and the concert. And both of those have given us some funds to work with. Not a lot. The store does really well while it's open. We could use more volunteers, so if anybody wants to volunteer to help, I'd be happy to hear from any of you. We also need people like docents to give tours to people, so we can have it open more often for tours. So the more participation we have, the more we can give back to the community. So what we are planning on is being open for 2 more third Thursdays in September and October. We may be adding another one in November or December. That's still under discussion. And that will be open on Medfield Day for tours, and the store will be open, which is September 20th. What we're looking at is that we would first thought we were going to work on the kitchen and get that revitalized. But this winter proved differently, that our furnace is in very bad shape. And I believe that we replaced most of the parts, but it's still not going to hold up. And so we're going to have to switch our focus to replacing the furnace, which is a major expenditure. So we are going to have to try to think of new ways to raise funds. We also still forge ahead with new relationships with organizations in town. And recently we have contacted the center to see if we can have something with the seniors, whether they want to help out, whether they want some program. We're seeing what that might work out. So we're just looking to the future to work with all the groups, and I'm really pleased to hear that all the groups are starting to talk. That's something I think Richard and I have talked about several times, that we need to be more consistent in knowing what each other are doing to have a better program that we can offer to everybody. And I agree with what other people have said about our main thing here in Medfield is that we have the historic elements here, and we really do have enough to be an attraction. We have the mill site, we have the Clark Tavern, we have the Peak House, we have Hannah Adams House, we have the Dwight-Derby House. All of these are significant buildings, all have amazing history. The Dwight-Derby House actually connects to fairly large national goings-ons and people. And I think a lot of people don't know how far our arms have reached over history. And I think that's something that if we develop this tour or whatever, this is something that we can really start developing and offer to people for them to become more knowledgeable about all of the people of our past. So that's about where we are at this point in time, and I thank you for the opportunity. Any
Thank you so
questions?
much.
Any questions?
Jean Minio is the chair of this committee, but she wasn't unable to be here, so she forwarded some notes along to me so I could update folks about Straw Hat Park. I guess is no longer Pocket Park, it's Straw Hat Park, so I'll put on my straw hat and read the notes here. We had a very successful organization, and Jean ran a nice committee. We were able to meet half dozen or more times, and Monique from the Garden Continuum in town, I want to give her a tip of the straw hat, as it were, for her guidance in landscape architecture and that, and that was pretty nice for the town to enjoy that, the benefits of pro bono work there. It's pretty extensive, and I'm assuming it's not inexpensive. We don't have the final design yet. We're sort of still in that stage. Right now, the latest was, I guess it's, I don't know, Mike, maybe you know, is it Norfolk County Engineering? Is that?
Yeah,
Is it-
I have a call into the county engineers. They had agreed to do some survey work on it. Unfortunately, the county commissioners have a policy of no new hires, so if someone leaves, they can't replace them.
Oh, I see.
And one of their engineers left this summer to take a job on the North Shore. So they're short-staffed, and they have a list of projects that we've asked them to do for the town, and so.
We wanted them to get involved and do some of the site work to see what could actually be done so that we could sort of finalize what's going to go on there, and then that in turn allows us to get the fundraising ball rolling.
Yeah, so
So we're kind of, we had hoped, the committee had hoped that it would have been done by now based on what we had been told, but I guess there's been some delays. I just learned about this myself the last couple of days, but
yeah,
So that will be good when they can get-
I know we've also asked him to do some work on the public safety building, some survey work
Yeah.
on that. And on the,
I assume that would take precedence easily, given the nature of the,
time
thing,
frame
but
on it, yeah.
that-
But
that
I
would be a-
think, you know, they may be able to do it while they're here doing that work, and so I
Yeah,
just
that
have
would be
to see
great.
if yeah.
that'd be great, because then we could kind of keep going with the momentum that's been generated. And just read what else. So we were kind of a couple months behind on that. Our design is going to be dependent upon the survey, and then at that point we'll be able to establish a fundraising plan and sort of finalize the design. I know that Monique worked hard to come up with a plan that was not a maintenance-intensive design. I forget the actual terminology, but it would, it's sort of front-end loaded. Once things are in place, it only becomes a twice a year in terms of intense maintenance. So that ongoing expense to the town, we tried to develop a plan where it wouldn't be an ongoing expense, and that DPW and/or Park and Rec they wouldn't have to take a heavy expense as like having another park to maintain. This would be sort of, the plantings and things would be enough. That didn't require a lot of ongoing maintenance. So I did a lot of nodding at that one. Monique had a suggestion. Well, it sounds good to me. That was the scope of my involvement, but, so we have that. The idea was to get a better handle on the design so that something more concrete could be unveiled by Medfield Day, given where it is. It'll be right at the center of Medfield Day and sort of generate excitement. People will be back in town and so forth. So ideally, the survey will kind of nudge things along and we can get going in that respect. Let me just see what
Matt,
else.
is the survey just to find the four corners of it, or is it more than that?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I think it was a boundary survey, existing conditions survey, you know, trees, stone walls, rocks and that, and
Has a fairly decent pitch in it, coming
yeah,
down from
Figure out the
Starbucks.
slope.
And
So that-
they also wanted the elevation, you know, the contour. Yeah.
On tour. My guess is that it's a little more
And just the
work
four
than if it was
corners.
just a flat
Mm.
rectangle. There's been some work done on the building behind Zebras. I don't know if there's a dentist in that building. They just refaced that.
Yeah.
And sort of that back corner, that's the back corner of the park. So kind of depending on what that border looks like, we'll have different ideas about maybe a bike rack or different things in there, and maybe work with Zebras to reconfigure where their dumpster is or whatever. So there's still a little bit of work to do. But it's a good space. People are pretty excited about it. We had decent response to asking people to get involved in the naming survey. There were quite a few responses, and one of the ideas is maybe to somehow incorporate the name into some of the stonework or some of the other features of the park to kind of get that going. I'm not sure that a lot of people speaking history of the town, I don't know that everyone's familiar with why it's Straw Hat or what the nature of that. So this will be another thing that'll kind of get people connected to the area. I think it's good because it will benefit. It's a chance that everyone will benefit. There's no exclusion. It's not like, you know, you might say that the baseball field, well, that only takes a certain percentage of people who get involved in that sport, but a park like this is pretty much 100%. And it'll be ADA, and everyone will be able to enjoy it, you know, ADA accessible.
I think it's going to be a big meeting spot in town. I think it'll get
I think
huge
so.
use.
I think so.
I think too, and I know Anselin mentioned the idea of signage with a map, and I think the Historical Commission also now has, and I don't know if it's your theme or not, but I really like the looks of it, but at Meeting House Pond and now Baxter Park, there's now the sign. A lot of people had no idea that was even Baxter Park. It'd be nice if we get some kind of a sign, then people know the name, and maybe some kind of a brief history, which we would be able to get as to why it's called, you know,
Right.
Straw Hat, and the whole tie of the hat industry here
Sure.
in Medfield.
So I'm envisioning like a metal plate with a picture of the Straw Hat Factory and a little blurb about it. I don't think that's too expensive to do.
Yeah, a lot of that is going to be, there's certainly been a lot of ideas presented, some of which will be available depending on how the funding shakes out. Once we can get that sort of started, and then by next year we'll have a better, Gene lists here, the overall goal would be to present a revised or reduced budget request at town meeting next April. And then when that's all in place, then the actual construction can get done probably fall of 15.
I hope, one of the selling points when we, the Selectmen and the Warrant Committee endorsed the meal tax, one of the selling points we gave, and I know Gus Murby, Chair of the Warrant Committee,
Yeah.
could justify, because many of the restaurants are in the downtown area, and if we can spruce up the downtown area, that's going to bring more business to the restaurants. And he used that as a justification. So I hope that we can get some of that meal tax money to help out some of these different projects in the downtown area, be it, you know, the park or other such areas.
Yeah.
And then just with Pete, I agree, I hope we come up with some kind of a master plan so that on the sign, we're gonna be consistent with what the signs are gonna look like, and then whatever the best recommendations from the sign committee and from the Parks and Historical Commission, what is the best route to advertise that history? What are the signs gonna look like so that in the future we can keep with that pattern, so we don't have this, was Mark in his jacket there, this quilt type of a setting.
Madras, that's what everybody's talking about here, Madras.
And then Gina mentioned that, I guess Pete and Mike, you were involved with the granite blocks that were down at, off of West Mill, I guess, or West Street? Or West
Street,
Mill?
yeah.
Apparently pretty sizable blocks.
They're good, they're just the right height, I think, to act as seats.
So I think there's a plan that might be incorporated, those where we could actually use those within the design. The space sort of lends itself to, it seems like there's going to be sort of a wall or a stone feature against that incline. And then, on the wish list, it would be things like, a water feature, which is expensive and is sort of not maintenance friendly, but certainly attractive. A lot of people have requested that.
On that point, just so you be aware, we did put the stone benches in the park across the street.
The gazebo?
Yes, and a lot of people, and we did it because we put wooden benches in the gazebo and they were frankly trashed. So we decided we'd put something pretty invincible, and we used the stone benches, and we did get a lot of complaints that they were very uncomfortable. So it's a mixed bag. If you make them comfortable, they get trashed. If you make them invincible, people don't use them, so.
Bring your
Although
own.
those Adirondack chairs have stayed out there for quite a while, and I see people using them.
Part of our thinking was we put some effort into trying to go to the scope of our audience of 8 to 80 or 8 months to 80. So we were thinking like those blocks, kids are going to climb, so we provide some climbing for them, and then incorporated sort of on the other side would be the standard benches, ostensibly more comfortable. But ideally have some features that would appeal to pretty much everybody, as opposed to making it more of a playground atmosphere or more of we try to not do that or not exclusively do that. It's not really that big to begin with. But I don't know if I had mentioned this before, part of for me anyway, is the horizon. If this is really just the tip of the iceberg because of Meeting House Pond sort of looming across the street as presumably going to need the same type of work or whatever's going to happen there, be it a new bridge or the memorials or the seating, and et cetera, et cetera. But let me just make sure I got everything here. Yeah, so that's it. So that's it. If we get that, we get the engineering done, and then presumably that gets the ball rolling again. We last met, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, so it's like everything else is kind of hanging out for the summer. But we'll see where we go.
Yeah, well, good luck on getting things done by Medfield Day then.
Yeah, the idea is to because people will be asking, they'll want to know like what's with the 3 chairs, and hopefully get a sign up that has a thermometer and generate some enthusiasm for maybe get a straw hat out there with a big slot in it.
I heard a rumor that there might be a piano there this summer.
Piano?
Piano.
I don't know about that.
Sounded good to me.
It's interesting, I think we did the Dwight-Derby house, one of the teachers came up with a proposal for the kids to collect their pennies. And I think they raised actually quite a bit of money with just penny collection, so. Yeah. So if you can come up with some kind of an unusual gimmick like that appeals to people.
I think it'll be fun because it's sort of the tangibility of it. the kids or whoever raises money will actually be able to connect the dots and see. It'll be right in front of them what the money is going to, as opposed to something else.
Yeah.
So that's that.
Thank you very much. Next up is the Aesthetics Committee. And we'll hear from Matt.
Getting very comfortable here.
Like a one-man show.
Aesthetics, yeah. Well, part of it is sort of folds into what we talked about before, because Richard had got the ball rolling on the aesthetics, with the idea being that one of the representatives on that committee would be from the downtown committee. So that was another instance where I didn't take a step backward quickly enough, and I got on that as well. And then that was sort of the same with Pocket Park, was that have a downtown committee representative on that. I don't know, I talked to Sarah a little bit. She sort of was, she became our chair, but she was unable to come tonight also, so.
You're referring to Sarah Raposa.
Sarah
the town
Raposa,
planner.
yes.
Yep.
We, at this point, we seem to think, I don't know, Richard, maybe you would fill us in on it. What the original plan was this committee was not going to be an ongoing one, was to come up with a design and then we would no longer be. Not that the town would no longer have any aesthetics issues, it just wouldn't be this specific. It probably would be part of a larger group, downtown study committee or.
Well, the Sidewalk and Aesthetics Committee, first of all, was appointed by the Planning Board. So they were appointed under the Planning Board. And again, part of the idea was when things like sidewalks or crosswalks or tree planting, so it's not haphazard, that there be some type of a plan, even though the Planning Board, I don't believe, can direct some of the actual designs on some of the buildings. But if eventually it's something the planning board thought was wise, I think the eventual goal would be to have a design review board. But the idea of this committee, and Sarah did a nice job, actually, one of the goals has been completed, and that's the vote that your committee took on the sidewalk with the brick. And if you look outside of the new Brothers Marketplace, running from South Street to North Street, it has the border very similar to what is on Pound Street. And the idea that tree planting and grading would be done. So they've come up with the recommendations. Mike Leader and others have come up with a list of the type of trees that should be planted. That will be, the roots will go down and not buckle the sidewalk, that they will be more or less maintenance-free, so that they're not going to be dying, that they're not going to be a type of tree that's going to have such a wide, umbrella, so to speak, that you can't see the signs of the businesses that are there. So all those things, to make those recommendations, give that to the planning board. In my own opinion, if you then had a design and review board that could look at all these things first, and it would be a voluntary, not mandatory, but it would have a lot of weight because they would have a recommendation, whoever is going to come before the planning board, and somebody wants to come before the planning board, they want an agreement by the planning board, and that's where the design review board, I think, would have a lot of weight. And so that we have a master plan, we have some consistency with the sidewalks, the tree plantings, we have a plan. And so when these
Streetscape.
builders come in, or the new businesses come in, they kind of know what it is, we have here in Medfield. So I think that was the original goal, and once they made the report, they would be dissolved.
Right.
Is what I envisioned.
Right, but now, like, sort of that template with the basket weave brick design is in place to be replicated, presumably, in the downtown area, so that when a sidewalk needs to be replaced, we can go with the new design and then sort of continue that brick pattern that lends itself to just sort of adds a little bit of the aesthetic that we're looking for downtown. But even that is, in a sense, it's just sort of a starting sort of a jump-off point for planning or design review in terms of the whole streetscape, because you'd have sidewalk and tree and lighting and trash receptacles, seating, flower pots, that kind of thing. That's going to lend itself to a pedestrian-friendly atmosphere. And then that helps out your parking situation, because people will want to be, maybe not want to be on their feet, but they won't mind it as much maybe if they have areas that are pedestrian-friendly. And then, you know, that's going to benefit everybody. The only other thing I was thinking as sort of an offshoot of the sidewalk committee was that we had talked about the crosswalks, the one down by the Unitarian Church by 25 North, and then the Main and North, of either going with the brick pavers or stamped concrete, or the painted, I don't know, mosaic's not the right word, but a painted design to sort of make it more aesthetic. That's sort of like ground zero, I think, that area. But I'm thinking, you see what other towns have done, and I think it makes a difference in terms of making the crosswalks more noticeable. So it's more attractive and it's safer. But I don't really know where that stands at this point. That was sort of an offshoot of that sidewalk design, so I don't know if Ken Feeney gets involved, or I'm sure there's budget issues with that as well, but you know, that's something else to be considered, for what that's worth.
Yeah, there's another issue there we have to be careful of too, and that's the ADA, Americans with Disability. I'm not sure, someone told me that part of the proposed regulations were that all crosswalks had to be at right angles, because blind people need to know when they go into a crosswalk that they can go straight and they will still be in the crosswalk, and if it cuts off at an angle, they often don't know. But I'm not sure whether that regulation has been adopted or not. That particularly for that crosswalk would be a problem.
Yeah.
So before we
You don't
go ahead
know.
with the stamping, we have to make sure we're on solid ground in terms of ADA.
Oh, the current non-right angle ones are grandfathered? Is that what you would
I
say?
don't know, you know.
You know what I'm
that's
saying?
We'd have to look into before we go ahead
Yeah.
with them,
Because it seemed to me there was a plan in place to sort of do that one in front of Zebras as sort of a test drive,
I think we
Just-
did talk about that, yeah.
to get that one going and see how it would hold up over the seasons with the plow and the rest of it. Or
I think some of the towns that put the brick in, the actual brick, have taken them out because it was a problem with
think
plows, and it was also
use like a
problem
substrate
with
now, or stamped.
noise, with the, particularly with the landscape trucks hitting them. And, you know, they sort of crash, and
They
they were
chipped,
probably
yeah.
in some of the towns, they were noisy for,
But I don't really know at this point what it takes to get that conversation going again, or if that's anything that's worth pursuing, or if that's a game, you know, if it's a game.
It's
ender.
definitely worth pursuing. I think that, in my mind, that's one of those agenda items for the charrette, or maybe. I
Yeah.
mean, whoever's going to do the planning for the downtown should certainly take that up.
Yeah, I think that streetscape is a big part of what we're talking about,
Yep.
and that sort of infects, or if that's the
Yep.
wrong word too, but it gets involved in all the other committees
Sure.
on downtown. So that's something else to think
Yeah.
about. But that's about all we had. But so I guess we're now an ex-committee, our sidewalk committee. We're dissolved.
Well, I would think at some point you would have to make a report to the planning board.
Yeah. I can go over that with Sarah, I guess, and see what they want to do.
but you're more than sidewalks, is aesthetics committee, I mean, you.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Sarah put that the goal was to incorporate bricks into the streetscape. But as we got involved in the meetings, this other stuff quickly came into play. It was beyond bricks. It got into trees, and it got into the trees in the sidewalks, and then it got into crosswalk and lighting and here, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you could just take any one of those elements out. You'd want to, I think you'd want to incorporate as much as you can, because one influences the other in terms of how your lighting's going to set up on the sidewalk and the rest of it, or your seating or whatever. But
Yeah, I would hope the planning board, and maybe you guys would have to report to them, but would come up, that Medfield have some type of a design review committee to look at all these things before, someone comes
I'm
in.
not sure what's in place now for, I don't-
There's no real design review board right now. The planning board, by law, is restricted to what they can actually rule on, and many of these things are outside their jurisdiction. But if you had a design review committee or board that made those recommendations, they can't mandate it, but they can make those recommendations, then that just gives the planning board a little more weight, and it also gives the person doing the work a little more guidance as to what the town's looking for.
I think part of it, too, has been the historic districts, the skill of the historic district in negotiating features to be included in the design in order to get approval.
Sure.
It's been a big factor because a lot of the downtown is in a historic district, so.
So they have some powers because
Yeah.
of the historic district. I mean, you can mandate the design review committee to have actual authority to mandate it. In some place, Carmel, California, I think, has a design review process where you have to go and you have to do what they tell you. 30 years ago, I saw a picture of the McDonald's in Carmel, California. It was gorgeous. I mean, it wasn't one of these drive-by highway things. It was it was all half timbered and it looked great.
I thought, though, under zoning, aesthetics was excluded.
I don't know. Our town council has disappeared. Maybe it's different in California than it is in Massachusetts. I don't
I
know.
think you're right. Because I know with the signs, I don't know if signs is next on the list, but that it's seemingly not addressed, that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think
It comes down to, making suggestions about what might be the best thing to do, or try to get applicants to keep in the flavor of the character of the town,
Right.
as opposed to mandating.
Yeah.
Right.
Matt, we're gonna go to the planning board now. I know you might be back later for the sign advisory.
Yes.
Is there someone from the planning board? All right, Matt, we're back to you with the sign advice. Are you doing the sign advisory committee?
Yeah, yeah. The only thing that I had wrote a few notes on was the sort of the latest issue. Well, let me back up, I guess. Let me say that for people who don't know, I guess, that the sign advisory committee works out of the building department, and it's in charge of reviewing proposals that have to do with Chapter 13 in our bylaw, just specific chapter just for signs. And the zoning, it's a zoning element, and it's sort of governed by the building department, I guess, for lack of a better place, it's ended up
the
down there.
enforcement, I think.
Enforcement, yeah, but that's where we work out of. So, and primarily it is, our work is with new businesses that will come in, like example would be Brothers. We were just had a meeting with them last week, looking at what their proposal was as it relates to what the town allows in the bylaw. And there's a lot of crossover with ZBA and some planning as well as building code sometimes comes into play. So it's mostly a zoning thing. But we think that with the recent changes, we think that the flavor or the opinion of the town has always been sort of like less is more. Like the feedback we get is that the Starbucks, I guess it's not saying much that it's an improvement over what was there, but people are saying that that's an attractive centerpiece now to downtown. And if you notice, there's not really any signs. And that's part of, I think, of what makes it attractive. They have enough signs, and I think obviously they have enough signs because you can never get in there. And I think that it looks good, and I think people are going to like what's going to go on across the street at Brothers, because it's tasteful and minimal, and I think because of their location, the message gets out. You don't need a blinking light or some of the other elements sometimes people use. So we've been busy with that. I know the selectmen get involved with signs, mostly like the temporary type signs for placement on town land for Girl Scout sign up or soccer or whatever. That's not something that we would get involved in. But I wrote a couple notes because I know that we haven't talked about the Park Street. I know that there's been some buzz about maybe trying to get a sign on that corner. And I looked at some notes, and I couldn't believe that I've been doing it this long, but it was from 10 years ago. No, it was from 15 years ago. This issue came up, and it came up again 10 years ago. So apparently we're on a 5 years. So I guess in 2019 we'll be revisiting the Park Street sign issue.
To see if it looks right.
I know that there's a lot of support for a sign at that intersection, or the merchants are looking for some consideration there. But we took the position before that we kind of stand with that we wouldn't support that. As your sign advisory board, we would advise that it's not a good idea for a lot of reasons. I think one of the bigger reasons is that you get into a dangerous area when you specifically create an exclusion to a piece of the zoning bylaw that only benefits a small section of the merchants, in the sense that to create this singular exclusion, by definition, is unfair to the other town's retailers. So it puts the town sort of in an odd spot. Certainly you're supportive of Park Street, but there's a dozen or more other retailers who are not in prominent spots around town who ostensibly would be entitled to the same thing. So you're opening up a door that I'm not sure the town wants to do, because one off-premise sign quickly becomes 6. I'm not making a case for any of the other merchants. I'm just trying to do what's sort of equitable. Interestingly enough, one of the first elements of the sign bylaw is that one of the first prohibitions is that off-premise signs are not allowed, and that's been pretty well supported by. It's not formal feedback, but just the limited feedback that we get. No one's ever asking us for more signs. They're always the feed is, why is that sign there? Can we get rid of that sign? So, from a resident element, I guess it wouldn't enjoy strong support. I don't think that trying to help anyone who has a business in town is a bad idea. This isn't an anti-Park Street sentiment. I just don't think that that's the right way to do it. We've always tried, the signage board, we look at ourselves as much as an advocate for the applicants as much as a representative of the town, to try to teach them how to maximize what they can do. And we always encourage the creative solution, as opposed to, I don't necessarily just putting up another sign isn't necessarily going to solve the problem down there, I don't think, based on doing this. there's signs there now that are not allowed for whatever the store specials are down the street. If we put up a freestanding sign, those other signs are still going to be there because they're going to want people to know that it's whatever it is, 3 for $1 today or whatever the special is, to try to get them down Park Street. One of the other issues was, I don't know, I guess it would necessarily be on town land. So now, do you want the town in the sign business? Who maintains the sign? Who enjoys the liability of the sign? I don't know. You know, what happens when a vendor changes? Who's responsible for updating the sign? Just ideas.
Yeah, yep, I think it was more, it was going to be a generic sort of sign indicating that there was a commercial or retail district down there, as opposed
You know,
to...
last time we got into it, the Park Street also is residential.
Mhm.
So some of the folks, I don't know currently, but at the time they weren't so keen on having their business this way pointed down on the street that they live on. I think at the time, it might have been someone who was trying to sell their place, so that was not a great selling point for a prospective buyer, but it's not as cut and dried as if it were in a different area of town, because you're bordering right on the residential area. You have the Upham House there, and you have the Park Street residences. Another issue I had in my notes was its proximity to the railroad tracks. There's a lot going on there. People cross there. And a sign is just an unneeded extra distraction, in our opinion. So those are, sort of revisiting the issue, we didn't really come up with any compelling reasons why it's different now, with the understanding that you'd certainly like to help the businesses that are down there. There are a lot of businesses down there that have been down there a long time and have been successful without the sign. So I don't know that the sign is going to make the difference there for those that are struggling. But that's just the opinion. That's just from doing it. The style of sign, the directory sign those are designed to be on premise. If you think about it, like there's one in front of 270 Main, which is next door to the car wash. The donut and the Medfield wine is in there. They have a directory sign, but it's meant to guide people who are already on premise. They can pause out of traffic and see, oh yes, this is the building where I need to be, as opposed to, I think, what was proposed on that corner down there. They're looking for advertising. You see what I mean? And the directory sign isn't advertising.
Yeah, I don't think the town wants to have an advertising sign for the retail establishments, but...
It quickly gets a little more involved
Yeah,
than.
it creates some issues, obviously, yeah.
Let me just. I mean, I had some other points, but I think you kind of get the idea. They're not new points, but I don't see that much has changed. And
So I'll just mention one thing, that I was stopped at the stoplight on 109 up by Shaw's this weekend, and I looked over at the Shaw's sign that's out by the street, and I thought to myself, man, that's a nice sign. Medfield did a really nice job of getting that sign reduced in the scope that it is, and I think it was you guys that did that, so thank you for,
at the Shaw's Plaza.
yeah. Isn't that
Yeah.
yours work?
Yeah, the way the bylaw works is it is restrictive in the amount of square footage that's allowed at a particular case. So Shaw's, when working on that project, that was obviously one of the biggest one, I guess, in town. They didn't have a lot left over when they were done with what was on the building.
Oh, all right.
So they were down to 14 square feet or whatever. But yeah, I agree.
It works well.
Better, yeah, it's better. And the thing is, too, is that's a good example, because now that sign is not so large enough so that your eye is now attracted to the building, and that might give you a better idea to what's going on in there.
Yep.
Versus if you had a big
Blocking
freestanding
everything.
sign out
Blocking
front,
everything.
now you get visibility issues with traffic, then you can't really see what's on the building and that kind of thing. So it's kind of, I mean, I didn't know half as much, but just from doing it, you end up learning a lot about sort of how it all works, how it all fits together, so.
Yeah, I think one of the nicest thing about that parking lot is the landscaping. I mean, they change
Yeah,
the
like a
flowers
buffer,
all the
yeah.
time.
Yep.
The trees are now getting of a substantial size, and they break up the asphalt field that you normally get from a shopping center parking
Right.
lot. So I think that makes a huge difference also. Very attractive.
We did a lot down at 27 and 109. That Cumberland's and, I was going to say Friendly's, Dunkin' Donuts and CVS have all recently been done. And you'll see that I think we really took pains to try to minimize what was going on there. There's so much traffic at that intersection that signs are necessary, but not to the extent that, and you'll notice all those buildings have a blank wall on them. And I don't think any of them are suffering for business.
No.
So in that sense, signs can get overrated sometimes. You know, and certainly the merchants, they'll say like, oh, more is better, but then it's something that all the rest of us have to live with, you know? So, for what that's worth. I think that was my fourth.
Thanks,
You'll finally
Matt.
be done with me.
So we skipped over the Historic District Commission. Russ, are you doing that? Who did you think was doing it?
Well, I believe they're meeting at the same time. I believe.
Oh, they're meeting right
downstairs
now
meeting
somewhere.
right
All
now.
right, all right, all
That's
right.
my understanding.
So we won't hear from them then. So I guess that's,
I noticed there are a couple of people here, like Russ is with MEMO, and Bill Pope was with the Zillow Gallery. I don't know whether, did he leave? I don't know whether.
Yeah, Bill left.
It'd be kind of interesting to get updates on where those stand. I know you're having another successful season with your concert series. And
did you guys move the wire for the street banner? Is that in a new location now? I thought it was on the other side of the tracks
I don't think
before.
so, but that would have been the fire department's volition to do that if they
Oh.
did it.
It was probably Henry Marcel. He does all those sorts of things.
So I don't know that it's in a different location. Actually, the reason I came tonight, before the end of the meeting, was because of MEMO's request for the use of the town seal. Would that be appropriate to talk about now?
Sure.
Probably out of order, but,
Yeah.
so I think you have copies of what the design is going to look like.
Looks good.
The theme for Medfield Day this year is Welcome to Medfield Day. So what we did was we took the sign, as you come into town, a rendition of the sign, and instead of saying Welcome to Medfield, it says Welcome to Medfield Day. It has on it the year that MEMO was organized, the first Medfield Day, 1980. And it just so happens that within the design of the actual sign is the seal of Medfield. And so when it got to our designer coming up with the design and asking for an electronic version of it to put into the design, it came to our attention that, well, this is proprietary to Medfield, and we really need to get the town's selectmen's approval to actually use the town seal. So we're only using it for purposes of putting it into the sign on the shirt because that's how it exists in reality. And we're not using the seal for any other purposes within MEMO or within Medfield Day. And there's no intent to use it in the future. It's really just for this one limited thing. Obviously, if we were to come back again, if we were to have a need for it in the future, we would come back each time. But this is only for a limited purpose to make the sign somewhat realistic as to what that is. So formally asking for the approval of the
So-
selectmen to use.
Here's what I know about this, and it also relates to back when I ran Medfield Day, which was that I actually used the town seal on a hat for MEMO one year. And I discovered that you had to get permission from the town clerk, not from the Board of Selectmen. So I mean, I think it's a great idea myself.
Oh, well, we actually asked the town clerk, and we were told that we had to come here.
That's it.
Oh,
There you go.
So my authority was probably
Ac-
invalid.
Actually,
felt
the
the
way it
same
came
thing,
was by
yeah.
way of Christine.
There's
Carol
two
said,
separate statutes. One, first of all, the seal is akin, for those of you who are attorneys, to the corporate seal. It's a corporate seal for a public corporation. That's what it represents. So therefore, it's in the possession of the town clerk for the purpose of sealing official documents. In fact, I believe when you do bonds, the town seal gets put on those bonds, as an example. So it's for official town business. Now, there's another statute, which is a criminal statute, although it's a very minor fine, but it's for unauthorized use of the town seal. So, since it's criminal for unauthorized use, that presupposes that there can be an authorized use. That being said, because it is the official seal of the public corporation, it implies that it's official town business. In the case of Medfield Day, frankly, I don't have a problem also having run Medfield Day for many years and being involved with MEMO, but as we know, it's very much a private-public partnership type of thing, so the town is intimately involved in it. So I would not have a problem with advising you that if you chose to honor the request. That being said, I would be very cautious moving forward in terms of other requests to use the seal.
but actually I'm questioning now, what you call the town seal for documents, is it really that? Or is that just a artist rendition of something to use for town of Medfield? Is that really the town seal that is the official seal? I don't know.
Official seal, yeah.
That right,
I believe so,
We have an
has all
official
that
seal.
stuff in it.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's not in color,
right,
but it's an imprint,
yeah.
And when we imprint it, it looks like this,
not in color.
but not in
No,
color.
You've
but
got
all-
to,
all that stuff.
and the town seal's on a flag hanging at the State House. That is the official seal of the town. Shows up on the town report,
It was voted, it was adopted by the town meeting.
which it's supposed to be.
Mr. Chairman, then I make a motion that, using this rendition that they have, that we permit MEMO to go ahead with their shirts that contain within that the town seal.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Yep. Just for this rendition of the T-shirts, and any future use, we'd ask.
Okay,
additional
I'll just
permission.
amend that for the 2014 Medfield Day
T-shirts.
T-shirts.
I'll second that.
As amended, all in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Thank you. Summer concerts are going great. We haven't had a rain out yet so far. We have 5 left, counting this week. And it's been very good turnouts the past few weeks, so that's going well. Even with the challenge of the construction over at Brothers Marketplace, it hasn't been a problem. Matter of fact, the first concert we had, seemed to be the head construction guy came over and asked what was going on and said, oh, well, we'll make sure that every Thursday we'll make sure the lots are clear and clean and swept and that kind of thing when it was still dirt. So they were very supportive helpful for that. And, planning for Medfield Day starts in February, and we're going strong on that. The membership is healthy. It's around 80 members. You were saying a lot of, businesses in town aren't members. We're always trying to attract more, but it's a very healthy membership at this point.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks.
And thanks for doing the summer concerts. I mean, in a lot of towns, that's paid for out of the property tax monies, and in Medfield, it's done thanks to the hard work of people like Russ and MEMO. Yes, Cheryl?
Russ also speak on the Lowell Mason.
Sure.
Over the course of the past year, we've done a little bit of improvement to the looks. As you may know, add a little Band-Aid type siding to kind of help the looks a little bit. We've done some work around the yard, volunteer basis. Some non-board members have come in and helped us with that. We're currently working on developing a capital campaign. We've hired a consultant to come on board with that. A lot longer process and convoluted than I ever thought developing a capital campaign would be, but it is. The next step physically on the property is to permanently get it on its foundation. Right now, it still has a couple of I-beams that are holding it in place. And so right now, we're working on getting a contractor involved to do that step, which will help. And then we'll be able to start doing the basement. The rest of the house is, historical in nature, and it involves a little bit more thought on what to do with that and money.
You did a nice job with the open house on Discover Medfield History Day. There was a lot of people that ended up going into the house, which I thought was good because it got them inside and thinking about it, so that was good.
Yeah, that did work out well, having it start right there. While people were waiting, it was a little bit of a captive audience to do that. You put up the jar, you get some donations anytime you put a jar out. And some people actually signed up to, have an interest in doing something too, so that was good.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
This program was made possible through the generous support of your Medfield friends and neighbors, folks just like you. And thanks for watching.